3, 2, 1.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Empathy Tales. This is your host, Victoria Wolders, and I am so excited to share with you another empathy tale. If you'd like to reach out to me, I would love to hear from you, and you can connect with me at mykidslocker.com. I'm also on Twitter a lot, and Facebook, and Instagram, and I would love to hear from you. Love to hear your input, love to hear your stories, and love to connect with you. As you listen to this empathy tale, I encourage you to send it to other people. Send it to at least one other person that you think might enjoy a story today. One that would be uplifting, one that might encourage them, and maybe even for a child that might need a bedtime story. So, I won't hold you back any longer. I know we're so excited to start this next story. Man, I can't believe we're at like 48. This is the 48th story I've told, and I just think this is amazing that I have this platform to be able to share these amazing stories that I share with my own kids. Sarah just turned 13. She's a teenager now. And, I still have my kids asking me to share these stories. And I just share them from the heart. Often they're from different things I've either seen or saw or read, or maybe something I've even felt sometimes. And today's story is called The Owl and the Condor. I know that I have heard about a film that was called The Eagle and the Condor, and it was about the indigenous people in the north being represented by the eagle, and the indigenous people in the south of North America being represented by the condor. And it was talking about these two indigenous groups of people and how these mighty birds represented two groups. And I just often, because I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, I often have seen eagles. There was a time where I went down to the Grand Canyon, and I think I've seen a condor once. And those are majestic birds as well. But I'm just so much more familiar with the eagle. And today's story, I'm kind of branching off and starting to talk about the condor. So this one's called The Owl and the Condor. And if you're comfortable, then I will begin. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the Oak and Eagle Kingdom, in the land of the Eastern Eagle, there were two villages of giants. One village of giants was called the Condor Village. They were known for their strength, their muscles, and their ability to be able to carry so many things. There was also another village of giants, and that village of giants was called the Owl Village. They were known for their smarts. They were intelligent and academic. They could solve any problem. The village of giants that was called the Condor Village had the condor as its icon. And the village of giants that was called the Owl Village had the beautiful barred owl as its icon. The majestic river that ran from the majestic mountains in the land of the northern eagle ran through their land. So on one side was the Condor Village. On the other side was the Owl Village. The two villages, for some reason, just didn't talk. They didn't really like each other. They were two different cultures, and they really didn't see eye to eye on many things. So, for example, the Owl Village felt it was very important to train their giants in school and to make sure that they learned everything about math and science and all the different academics. The Condor Village felt it was very important to train their young on how to be strong and their fitness and their skills such as archery, running, and sprinting. So they focused on that. For some reason, both villages just didn't really see eye to eye on many issues. When the time came, there had been a big forest fire up close to the majestic mountains. Some trees had fallen into the majestic river and had floated down the river. The owl village really felt that they needed to leave the wood in the river so that they could create shelters for the animals, and also to be able to bring healing to the river. The Condor village felt the very opposite. All the logs, all the trees, everything needed to be removed from the river so it could look pristine and beautiful, and they could use the logs and trees for different things that they could build. So as you can see, both villages had different perspectives on life and different ways to approach life over the centuries. There was never a bridge built. Part of the reason was because they were fearful of how the other village was going to interact with them, and they thought maybe their village would have to change. There was a young female giant that lived in the owl village. Her name was Intellect. And on the other side, in the Condor village, there was a young male giant, and his name was Brawn. So Intellect and Brawn grew up each in different cultures, but one thing they had in common was the fact that they both liked to be on boats. Often boats were really common on the majestic river. Intellect had some wonderful fruits and vegetables to sell. In the fall, she liked to sell pumpkins. She knew that the other villages could not grow those vegetables and fruit as big as hers, because her village had been specific in how to grow them and had grown in their knowledge and wisdom in how to grow the perfect pumpkin. Well, Brawn also knew that he needed to trade things just a little bit different than what Intellect would have to trade. He would trade equipment and different tools, and he really enjoyed using wood, carpentry, and steel. He really enjoyed using wood in his carpentry, and he used steel when he worked with weapons and different tools. He also was known to make machines. So he had all these tools that he wanted to trade. He thought they both did this, and each built their own boat. They were very different, but they managed to build each a boat. Intellect's boat was amazing. It had detail, it had design, it had magnitude, and it was a beautifully big boat. Brawn, his was bold, metal, and big, and it was well designed as well, but it was definitely made by someone who had skills in carpentry and metalwork, because his designs on his oars were beautiful. Each boat was strong enough to float to the middle of the majestic river. There was a small island in the middle of the majestic river that was formed throughout the year. Sometimes in the springtime, the island would disappear because the waters would rise, but most of the time the island was there. Intellect and Brawn lived in peace when they met in the island. One day, Intellect and Brawn just happened to be paddling along with their materials, and they stopped on the island, and they looked at each other and said, "Would you like to trade with me?" And they both agreed that they would trade the materials. See, both Intellect and Brawn had both been to the island, and it was such a peaceful place, but it seemed like every time they went, they never bumped into anyone. This time, they did, and this time, Intellect and Brawn were the first of their villages to talk to each other in decades. So Intellect gave fruits and vegetables to Brawn, and Brawn gave tools to Intellect. They were very happy, and they continued to be able to sell their products back and forth every day. But they were the only ones from their village that represented their culture. Sometimes they would get up. They knew that they could never truly be friends. One day in the late summer, when they were finishing off some trading, they looked up, and there was an owl and a condor sitting on one branch. The condor leaned over and said, "You both are very good friends. I think you should continue to be friends. And I think you should build a bridge of friendship." The owl looked at them and said, "Oh, yes, you must build a bridge. Together, you can do this." The condor said, "I think that both of you should build a bridge because you can be the unifying factor between your two divided villages." So, Brawn and Intellect looked at each other and agreed. They met every single day for the next month and designed a bridge that they thought would be appropriate. They both brought their designs back to their king. Brawn went to his king and said, "I have so designed this beautiful bridge." At first, the king was reluctant. He said, "You do not want to meet these people on the other side. They are going to be mean to us. They are going to be cruel. That is what tradition says." But Brawn advocated and said, "I think we should do something. I think we should build a bridge." Likewise, the same thing happened with Intellect. She went back to the Owl King, and he said the same thing. But Brawn and Intellect both managed to convince their kings. So they started to build, and they did. They started to build together. They started on one side together, and they managed to build a beautiful, strong, golden bridge that stretched between the Owl Village and the Condor Village. It took a lot of time, but they did end up finishing off the bridge. It was fall when they finished the bridge. What happened in fall was that there were big mudslides that came down the majestic mountain during the time when they were finishing off the bridge. The mudslides became so thick that they couldn't see the other side of each other's villages. On the day of the opening, they decided they were going to cross the bridge. They were going to invite all villagers to come. But what happened was the villagers became suspicious. The morning fog had risen, and it was above the river. The mud had shrouded the sides of either bank, and both villages were concerned that the other village was going to be mean to them. One of the villagers in the Owl Village said, "The mud, there's so much mud, maybe they didn't finish their bridge on the other side." And likewise, on the other side, on the Condor side, the Condor Village people, a couple people started saying, "There's so much mud, maybe they didn't finish their side." So, both villages chose not to walk on the bridge, but Intellect and Brawn did. They started walking from either side of their village, and they met right in the middle, close to the island. And just as that very moment where they met, the owls from the Owl Village and the condors from the Condor Village came and soared high above the sky above them. And all of a sudden, Brawn and Intellect held hands. As the condors and the eagles swooped closer to Brawn and Intellect, the people of both villages knew that it was safe to be on the bridge. So the villagers started to walk onto the bridge. They could hear the beautiful sounds of the owls and the beautiful sounds of the condors, as if they were making music together. Within minutes, the villagers and the kings from both sides came, and they celebrated on the center of the bridge. As they all met together, and the condors and the owls circled in song, the mist lifted, and the sun became bright. Just at that moment, the clearness of the river showed, and the mud slid into the river and washed away. And from that point on, the golden bridge that bound between Condor Village and the Owl Village were celebrated and loved, and two cultures that did not know each other and judge each other became friends. The condor and the eagle both came together in the middle of the bridge. And they mounted statues of a condor and an eagle in the middle of the bridge to symbolize the beauty of unification. Both villages grew in a deeper understanding of care, empathy, kindness, and that was all because of intellect and brawn, and them having the courage to bring up the idea of the bridge. The end. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for an empathy tale. This was a pretty cool one. I think that it has a lot to tell us about perspective taking, and that, maybe sometimes when we have disagreements with people, sometimes it's more to do with perspective. We really don't know how other people view their lives. Maybe they had a harder life. Maybe there were things that happened in their life that was a really big struggle to them. And maybe the way they're treating you is just a result of that struggle. I think that we also need to be generous with our assumptions. I think we need to really start seeing people as people who are trying to do the best they can with the skills they have. And sometimes people have difficulty communicating and may not know the proper language and words and actions to be able to communicate properly to demonstrate what love truly means. Well, I'm going to wrap up the empathy tale for today. If you have any questions, comments, reach out to me at mykidslocker.com. We'd love to connect with you. Follow me on all the social media outlets. I'd love to hear from you, and feel free to share this episode with someone else. Would love to hear back from you about your experiences, and I hope that you enjoyed this empathy tale. I hope you will create compassion one story at a time today, just as we have created compassion through this story. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time for the next empathy tale.
3, 2, 1.